Welcome to Booking Flights 101. Just kind of wanted to give everyone a brief overview of what this course is going to be about. Basically, it's going to be the best practices for saving money and getting the best flights. We're going to go over how to research, what to look for, and just the general strategies and tactics to use for booking flights, whether it's US or international. Who is this for? Well, basically, this is going to cover flights only. I'm not going to really get into hotels, Airbnb, rental cars. There's a lot of other strategies to lower your cost on those applications. However, there's many other costs when it comes to travel, but the majority of it would be your flight on the travel costs. So that's the main thing we're going to be covering to get significant savings on your overall cost for travel. We're going to deal with multiple different airlines. We're not really going to focus on one specific airline, so it's going to be used for everyone. It's not going to be used for using credit card points. We're not going to focus on one airline that has the best points. We're not going to open up multiple credit cards so that we can affect our credit rating. Now, don't get me wrong, points are great. However, we don't always have credit card points. We don't always have travel points are required to use certain type of airlines. So we're going to kind of go over for general requests when traveling. You don't typically have to fly with the same airline. You can fly with the ones you do have points with, but you don't have to. This is just for overall flights and the best strategies and tactics to save the most money. Um, we're going to look for the best flights when it comes to time. That includes the length of the flight and the time of day, the number of connections. There's a lot of things going on when it comes to cost of a flight. Um, Optimally, you want to travel when it's best for you. Sometimes the price reflects it. When it's best for everyone is typically when it's the higher cost. So we want to try to focus on getting that best time for us. We want to fly out of the best location where we're at and where we're going to. We want to make sure that we get it obviously at the best price, but the lowest cost isn't necessarily the best flight, but we want to get our best flight at the lowest cost with the shortest amount of time. And then on the date we would want to go. Sometimes it might be better to travel on a day earlier or a day later based on peak times, but you want to shoot for the times that are best for you. All right, so the rules for flying. Some general rules is holidays, events, the weekends are the highest cost. Anytime you're going to be traveling, and I'm sure everyone knows that when you're going on Thanksgiving back home or you're going to go back for Christmas, those are quadruple, if not even more, for the flight a week earlier or anytime the rest of the year. Same with events. Be up to date on what events are going on in that city. Even though it may not seem like a big event that's going on that you're not a part of, if there is something going on that's filling up all the flights, that could really affect your cost. Weekends are general. Sometimes certain cities, it's a big business hub maybe, and a lot of people are getting in on Mondays, flying out on Fridays. Sometimes Sunday nights are filled. Something like Las Vegas, it's a big weekend city, so a lot of flights are expensive on Thursdays and Fridays. Not really expensive on Saturdays, but very expensive on Sundays. You can get a pretty good cost on Wednesdays or Tuesdays where not as many people are in and out. So just general understanding of what time of year it is, the events that are going on, and what type of city it is that you can generally see from the price of the tickets. Now, tickets change daily, the cost of the flight. So it's good to do the research ahead of time and knowing what the best costs are. If you're booking the same day you first research, you typically would pay a lot more. So being able to do your due diligence beforehand is a great way to save money. You don't want to book too early or too late. Some people will try to book it all the way ahead of time. They think it's the lowest price then. Other people try to think that the flight needs to fill up, and so you can get a great deal last minute. Both are true. However, the majority of the time, you're better off booking in between that 6 month to 2 week window. Um, Basically, I would always recommend start researching 6 months to 5 months ahead of time, and then book maybe 2 months to 1 month ahead of time, depending on how far the travel is and how far in advance you just want to secure the flight. You definitely can get a cheaper flight a couple days before, even the day of. However, it's very risky. It can also be very expensive still, even more expensive than it was 3, 4 weeks ago, and you could be out of luck in that instance. So you can risk it if you want to. It's always based on your situation. However, a general rule is try to book it within that window of the 6 months six before 6 months and before 2 weeks, or after 6 months, I should say. Uh, uh, you just want to be careful on when you book it, but always try to give yourself enough cushion to book it well enough in advance. The cheapest does not always mean the best. Now, you can look just based on the lowest cost flight and you could save maybe an extra $200, but if it's a 20-hour flight compared to an 8-hour flight, it's a significant difference and not necessarily the best flight for you. So a lot of people just go on price, but it's never just about price. It's also about the time of flight, the location, the time of day you're leaving. A lot of things going on to it. So the lowest cost is not always the best option. Um, Try not to check a bag. Now, I know it's not easy. I know it's easier said than done for some people. However, if you can go without checking a bag, it's the best for your strategy of getting the lowest cost flight. I'll get into more detail on that later, but if you don't have to check a bag, don't check a bag. It adds a lot more complications, and with those complications, you're basically paying a lot more, not just on the check bag fees, but the overall cost on the different flights. You're kind of subject to where that bag can go, and it can cost you a lot more money. So if you don't have to check a bag, don't check a bag. Um, Another one is use friends and families for layovers. This is something I have done. Um, Not always uh, available for people, or depending on destination you're going to, but every once in a while you could find a good flight where you can connect through a city that you have a good friend or a family member, and you can kind of use it to your advantage of a way to see them, catch up with good friends or old or family members, and be able to spend time with them, uh, get your hotel for free basically, and be able to fly out the next day without having a layover in the airport. So that's something to take advantage of if you have that option. Um, Now, I mentioned this is not going to be about credit card points. However, if you do have credit card points, use those credit card points. Use credit cards in general for booking. Main reason is because of the points. There's security. There's discounts on certain type of credit cards. There's all little types of perks. General rule with traveling is using a credit card. There's hidden features in a lot of credit cards when it comes to the insurance. They will insure your flight without any extra cost. If you have a certain airline credit card, obviously there's more perks with that. A free check bag, maybe. It could be more points towards it. It could be using the executive lounge or giving it a better opportunity to go up to first class. General overall, it's much better using a credit card, and do not recommend using a debit card. Um, just there's no real benefit to it. So use a credit card and then pay it off the next day, so you're not getting charged any interest rate. And then final rule is the most important. The more flexible you are, the lower the cost will be. I mentioned about checking a bag. It's not very flexible. You're not very flexible with that when you're checking a bag. But at the same time, the date you're traveling, the time of the year you're going, there's several things that will increase that cost. Like I said, when on Thanksgiving and Christmas time is quadruple the price. If you don't really need to go at that time, then you can save significant costs. Now, that's an obvious one, but I mentioned something as far as Las Vegas. If you can go to Las Vegas on a Wednesday rather than a Thursday or Friday, a day earlier, you could save $200-300 easily. So just having that flexibility and If you want to get to the extreme, if you book to that day before or a couple days before, you could get the cheapest flight. That's where you're really flexible, obviously. So there's a risk with that, but if you don't mind if you don't get a flight, then it's okay. So that's probably the most important. The more flexible you are, carry on a bag. Don't really care what time of day you leave. Don't really care where you fly into. A lot of options with that, but that's the overall cost savings would be the more flexible, the better. Now, we're going to try to explain just how the logistics of the flights work. Now, this is important when it comes to understanding how you can really save cost. This map is just in the U.S. only, but it's similar and it works for international travel as well. There's basically hubs for all these different airports and all these different cities. As you can see, the bigger circles are some of the bigger hubs, like Chicago. You'll see Denver here, Atlanta, LA, Las Vegas, Phoenix. As you can see, Atlanta, Chicago, and Dallas, they're huge hubs right there. So, and even Denver, if you're traveling international, you're probably leaving from either Atlanta, Chicago, New York. New York just has multiple different airports, but when you have the more airports you have, it's kind of similar to having one big hub. But when you're traveling international, you're more likely going into these bigger hubs and not going from these smaller little connecting type uh, airports. So it's important to understand that type of logistics when booking a flight. And I can kind of give you an example of what we're talking about with those hubs. Let's say you're going from New York to New Orleans, and your day one you see the New York to New Orleans flight. You look at the cheapest one and you just book it. Now, it may be the cheapest one might be flying into to here, over to here, then to there, and that's how you got the cheapest one. Maybe you just look at, I just need to get there as soon as possible, and I don't want any connections, so I'm just going to book the first direct flight, and you go the one flight from New York directly, New York LaGuardia, let's say, to New Orleans, and you paid 4 times the cost as if you took a connecting flight. Mainly because there might only be one flight per day from that airport to New Orleans, and that flight was filled, so they're getting top dollar from you. You want to understand what flight would be that direct flight. Um, you want to understand what the cheapest flight would be based on connecting from here to here to here, or going through Atlanta most likely and going to Atlanta. And then you want to shoot for that cost for the cheapest flight, but you want to get the shortest time as well from New York direct to New Orleans. Now, the day you first look into the flight, that cost may be extremely high. However, as people cancel or it gets closer and into that 2 to 3 month or even 1 month window, maybe it drops down to as close a price as you've seen it for the cheapest flight you saw. And you can book that one flight from New York, the airport you want to leave out at, to New Orleans. And that's our goal, is to get to that cheapest flight at the best time too, and getting right there. That might not always be the case. Let's say it's something like Mardi Gras, and maybe you have an option of flying instead of out of LaGuardia, you're flying out of JFK, and you can use a different airport. And maybe there's 2 flights that go to New Orleans. You can watch that one. Maybe it's a little more travel for you to get to the airport, but you can still get to that direct flight. So you can use that option. The other option is using these hubs. Maybe you fly one airline into Atlanta and there's maybe 12 flights from Atlanta to New Orleans every day, or from Dallas or Chicago or Detroit maybe. And maybe you just connect from there, have a 30-minute layover, and are able to get over there for the same price as what that connection from 5 different airports would have been. So that's something to understand when you're booking these flights. You want to utilize these hubs, but you want to make sure how many flights are direct from where you want to go. If you want to go from Chicago to New Orleans, how many are from the Midway to New Orleans? How many are from O'Hare to New Orleans? And how many maybe even from Milwaukee to New Orleans? And you want to understand, if it is Mardi Gras, you might not be able to get those flights. Those flights might be spiked and are always at the top dollar. So maybe you're even flying into Mobile, Alabama from one of those airports and then driving. I mean, renting a car compared to paying an extra $800 in a flight might be worth it because if you're already going to rent a car anyway, that might be your best option. So understand, use this map, understand the hubs, understand if I need to get from Chicago to New Mexico, Albuquerque, understand that maybe there's only one option direct, but you may be able to get four options when you go from Colorado. So just really getting Colorado to New Mexico, you can figure out that cheapest flight there, and then you can figure out the cheapest flight because there may be 10 going to Denver from Chicago, and there may be another five going from here instead of just the one option from there. And that's how the flights will work out when you pull up the different options, but understanding that you don't always have to go one airline. Let's say you go United to Denver and then you take American Airlines from Denver to New Orleans. If you book it through United, United is going to give you the United flight here and the United flight here, and that might not always be the cheapest flight. So it's important to understand uh, where the hubs are and what the times are for the flights and what the cost is for the lowest cost as well. We'll get into more detail on that in a little bit. Some of the applications we'll look to use. Google Flights is probably the best for the research portion. You'll be able to look into everything as far as what the cost is, what the flight numbers are, the time of flights, everything along those lines that get you the general understanding. Hopper is one of my favorites. It's able to put in the exact flights you're looking for and then give you notifications when the prices drop and when it's most likely at its lowest point. This is a great app. However, one dangerous part of this is it does not give you the shortest time of the flight. You need to be able to understand that just because it's the lowest cost does not mean it's the best flight. So you need to kind of be working hand in hand and keep an eye out on what the cost is for the total flight, as well as the amount of time for the flight. So sometimes you have to pay a little more just to get the better flight, but it's worth it. And that's skip lagged is another one. We'll get into that. This one is a little more dangerous. You need to be a little more flexible. Some of them, they'll find you the cheapest flight that's direct or has a connection and it's the same airline, so it's no issues. But what their biggest skill is finding you the cheapest flight that you may fly. Let's say you were doing the New York to New Orleans, and it finds you a flight New York to Denver that has a connection through New Orleans. And basically, you're booking that flight New York to Denver, and you're just getting off in New Orleans. So you cannot check a bag with that one, but it's an interesting way to get a really affordable flight that a lot of people don't use that option. So that's something important to use as well. Of course, there's always Southwest for U.S. travel. It's a great way to get a low-cost flight, and they're very flexible. You can cancel flights and don't have to pay for checked bags. They do not pop up when it comes to the research in the Google Flights or the Hopper. You have to specifically go to the Southwest website. A lot of times they are going to be a little more expensive, but you have to understand the cost of checking a bag. If you're checking a bag, if you want the comfort of being able to cancel your flight without any extra fees, there's a lot of things that are advantage to Southwest. So it's important to use all these tools when researching your flight and then eventually booking the flight. And we'll get into more details soon. Google Flights. So www.google.com/flights. And this is the tab that you'll come up with. Now, let's say you want to go from Chicago to, I don't know, Seattle. So from here, what you want to do is you don't want to select the dates that you're actually going to be going. What you want to do is see what the cheapest flights there are on that route from Chicago to Seattle. Now, right now, they're showing a round trip of 218 from this day. This is recent, and then if I go, it'd be 319. So this is if you leave October 31st. So that may be a target, but let's see. You can click the calendar, and you can kind of go through. You see 246, See that 218? It'll highlight in green the cheapest flights. 382, that's during Thanksgiving. Christmas time, you'll probably see some spike as well. 323, 382. And then going forward, you kind of see this 275, 270, 270, 252. You're basically not seeing anything better than that 218. Now the caution with that would be that it's immediately booking, and so you kind of want to book the flight further in advance. Um, and so maybe you want to stick around this 250 range. May not be the lowest price, but you can book that well in advance and be safe and secure with your pick as well as getting a good price. So maybe around that 250 range. What you want to do is then select the time you're going. Now, let's say you're going to go um, uh, the 24th of February to the 3rd. Now, it's showing the cheapest flight is 319 or 293 round trip. Now, although it's the least expensive, you see it shows 11 hours and 57 minutes in one stop, a 6-hour layover in Denver. So time is money. Now you're going to save $30 maybe after taxes, maybe a little more for 6 hours. Is that really worth your time? No. You'd kind of want to see what this round trip non-stop flights, that's the ones you're targeting. So you can look at those and see even the flight number. It'll show United 241, and you can kind of focus on that flight. You know, that's the time you want to go maybe. You can look at that. You can also do notifications. So you can say track prices. You turn that on, and then when you show viewing, you can see email notifications. So you can get email. You can use both Google Flights and Hopper as a notification when those price drops. So when you see it get down to that 250 or less mark, you kind of know when to book. And then from there, you kind of know, okay, these are the flights I'm looking at. I'm looking at, maybe I know I need to go after work, so I'm looking at mainly this flight, and that's the one I'm focusing on where I can book this United flight 262, and if I see that dip below the 250 mark, just act on it right away because you know I'm not going to really find a much better deal. Better safe than sorry. I try to book it um, no earlier than a month out of advance. I mean, if you get to the 3 week on some more standard flights, it's okay, but you kind of want to know what the average price is, what time you're looking to go, and so when you get it, maybe you could have saved another $30 if you waited till the last minute, but you're paying for the security of actually having the flight at the time you want and when you want to go. So that's basically that, and I'll show you in the next slide what else we got going on. All right, so I'll kind of give you a quick understanding of how the Hopper app works. Open it up after downloading, and you'll get to this main screen for searches. You can go from any airport and then to your destination. What I'll do now is just, if we want to get aggressive on pricing, we'll book multiple one-way flights. So I'll just look into the one-way option for right now, but you can of course put it in for round trip. We'll go from Chicago to Maui, Hawaii, which is the Kahului Airport, OGG. You can select that there. And then you have round trip or one-way option. You can kind of get a general understanding of what the prices are for round trip, lowest to higher, as far as one way as well. And you can put filters in for basic fares, less than 4-hour layovers, whatever you may want to do. We'll just do general pricing for right now just because we want to get an idea of what the lowest cost would be. So let's say you could see here on the green buttons that those are the lowest cost, and let's say we do want to go on January 20th or so. So we can select January and then January 20th, select date. And you can see that the lowest current price is $298. Now watching is probably the best option for Hopper. This is the best quality feature. Basically, when you hit watch this trip, it'll give you notifications, updates, when price decreases, when price increases, when it would recommend to book. Basically, the notifications are the best sent to your email, so you can book the day of when the price drops dramatically. The biggest flaw with this, however, is going off price only. So you need to be careful, especially if you're booking last minute, that you don't get a layover that's an extra day or two. You don't want to have for a 4 hour flight to have a 8 hour layover. So don't just go off price. You want to go off total package. But when you know the price drops, typically they drop in other areas as well as direct flights. So you can click shop flights and it'll show you right now 297. And problem is we're at 1 day, 9 hours and 30 minutes as far as the total travel time. So it has one stop. So it looks like you'll be spending the night if you book that cheapest flight. That's something we don't want to do. We can change it right now to do the nonstop, and you see how the nonstop drops from or increases from 297 to the 1332, and obviously a significant jump for the amount of time. So we definitely want to know what the target timeline we should be shooting for, which is a 9 to 10 hour flight, and the target price would be around the $300 mark for the lowest price. And this is day one. Now we want to kind of monitor this as well and see when we see it at the lowest cost and try to shoot for as close to that low cost. However, what we would do is you can click on one of these 297 and you'll see, okay, Chicago to San Francisco, 4:45 p.m. to 7:40, and then a 22-hour layover. And now you're at 6:30 the next day and 10:15 at arriving. So really total travel time though is around that 10-hour mark though. So what we want to do is look into these individual flights. Now we see this is both Virgin America. Now we can use one or the other to book that flight for a low cost. We can go from Chicago to San Francisco on flight VX1215, or we can go from San Francisco to Hawaii using that VX1047. Now, recommended to look into those individual flights and book them separately. However, you don't want to book both of them because we know what the layover is. You may look to go with a different airline that can arrive from Chicago to San Francisco the same day, and maybe book it where it'll arrive around 4 o'clock or so. So then you have a 2.5 hour layover in case there's any delays. At the same time, you can get a really aggressive price probably on that. So now we'll go to Google Flights, google.com/flights, and we're going to look for the one-way flight. We're not going to do Chicago to Hawaii or OGG. We're not going to do that. We're going to do Chicago to San Francisco because we knew the majority of it and how much the pricing was for direct flights. So we're looking at the date of January 20th, and you see here we have an $83 flight nonstop at 4:15 p.m. to 7:40 p.m. Now, the issue with this, even though it seems like our cheapest option, we get in at 7:40, and there may be delays. You never know along those lines. And our flight, as we know, from San Francisco to Hawaii was 6:30 p.m. leaving. So we would miss that flight. However, we do have an idea of what the price is to get to San Francisco. So even if you wanted to stay overnight, you had friends and family there, we can kind of work with that number to book the flight. Now, if you need to book today and get the trip booked, I would not recommend this one. I would recommend maybe the next one here where we got 7:15 a.m. to 10 o'clock a.m. and then you have about a 6 hour layover for 8 hour layover, sorry, to get to your next flight. But you're at a $90 price. It's better than staying overnight, and it was a 22-hour layover in the previous one. So we can kind of look at options there that you can go up from nonstop, maybe get closer to that, but your price increases as the different flight options change. Now, big thing with um, this is American Airlines, and I believe the last one was American Airlines as well. However, if we're flying United at a different one here, or Virgin. I think the other one was Virgin. So if we're flying American and then flying Virgin, we need to make sure that we have enough time if you're checking a bag that you can pick your bag up at baggage claim, go back through security, and check into your flight. It's one of the reasons why it's better to carry on a bag. However, if you need to do that, it just have to consider the amount of time it takes to get from one flight to the next while you're having to pick up your bag. They're not going to transport it for you directly. It's just because you're booking these. The airlines thinks that you're going from one place to the other and that's it. That's your end destination. So if it's not the end destination, you still need to get your bag and go back through security. So now if we need to look into San Francisco to Kahului, Hawaii, one way, we see our flight options here. There's that 6:30 to 10:15 flight. It's showing at $200. So we're still at that same price range. It must have counted around $91 through Hopper to get from Chicago to. So we kind of understand what our prices are. Maybe it's around $210. It shows this one here at $180. However, it does have a longer flight and a one stop in Seattle. So we kind of understand what our price range is here and based on stops. So this seems like a pretty aggressive price, and sometimes it's a little more difficult to go from San Francisco to Kahului, Hawaii, compared to going from Chicago to San Francisco. So maybe this is the one you want to lock in first, and you can book this Virgin American 1047, go online and book it at their website. Then you have that locked in, and then you can kind of work with different flights on different airlines for Chicago to San Francisco. So that's how a lot of times I'll work it. If you don't need to book today, you can still watch this flight, but sometimes you can lock in if you see a good price, lock that part in, and then get as close as you can to go from Chicago to San Francisco for the lowest cost and getting as close to that 6:30 leaving time with enough time to get your bags if you need to, or if expecting any delays, maybe you try to get it around 4 o'clock and get in it around $90 for that flight.